safety meeting. And the first item on our agenda is the update on wildlife management. I know there were some questions or statements about that in one of our last meetings, so thank you, Mr. Hurt.
Good afternoon. Yes, I understand we had some folks show up at the last meeting, and I did talk to some. They did attend the City Commission meeting as well, so I did get a chance to talk to them and address some of their concerns and kind of give them an update. That's really what I'm here today to do. You recall back in April, we were here to talk about deer management, kind of give an update to the committee. At that time, the Kent County Road Commission Managing Director joined me, and we discussed the sort of expansion of this initiative, if you will. It's going to be beyond the city of Grand Rapids limits. It's going to include the entire area of Kent County. There's been a lot of activity that's already been going on. I just wanted to kind of give you an update because I committed to doing that. One of the things that has been put in place, local road agencies and public works departments throughout the county are now tracking when they're collecting deer carcasses. I know that might sound a little strange, but when we're hitting them with cars, they're not always reported, but when the agencies are picking them up and we've got a tool, we're actually tracking that. We can see it geocoded on a map on the entire county, and you can see where they're being picked up. So it's really good information. It's one thing we have not been able to collect in the past. When we were here back in April, we talked about Grand Valley being a partner. And I'm here to tell you that we've got a contract with Kent County and Grand Valley to begin taking survey samples around the county for deer population. That'll be kicking off this fall. They'll also be doing some additional surveying in the spring and summer of next year. A grad assistant has been hired to kind of lead that program for Grand Valley and to be kind of the lead of the project in surveying and data collection. In addition to that, there's been an agreement established for the Grand Valley team to do data sharing of the survey results. This is through the Regis. Are you familiar with Regis? Through the Grand Valley Metro Council. So we're actually going to be able to track some of this information. I'm pretty excited about being able to have this data at our fingertips. Another component of this is going to be a community survey that's going to be developed and be going out this fall. To the entire county. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to be distributed yet. It's probably going to be some sampling, but it'll give us a chance to hear from folks not only in the city of Grand Rapids, but the entire county, what they're seeing, what's happening, how they feel about it. It's going to be a good opportunity for us to collect some data. All this information is going to be put on the Kent County's webpage. They're working on creating a site for collecting and storing this data so that residents can see that information. They're working on the website. They're looking at around November to have that prepared and be able to share that information. The winter of 2024, which is unfortunately, I know it's 90-some degrees out, but it's fast approaching. Once we collect all this data this fall, a committee is going to be established that's going to include folks from around the entire county to be looking at how do we review this data. And what are the steps to work towards some sort of recommendations that the governing bodies from jurisdictions can look at? Because I guess in my view, the city of Grand Rapids may have a different perspective than a township in the northern part of Kent County and how you try to address some of the population issues with the deer population. So I think it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. I think it's going to be a variety of treatments, if you will, on what municipalities can end up doing. And we're looking at an anticipated delivery time of fall of 2025 to have all this information put together and the treatments, whatever it is that we're end up doing before the policymakers. Just as a side note, I'm not sure if you've been tracking with this. The state of Michigan recognizes that there are some concerns with deer population, particularly in the lower peninsula. The upper peninsula, their concerns are not enough deer, if you can believe that. The population is much different in the UP than it is in the lower peninsula. So in response to that, they've kind of gone on I want to call it a listening tour. They've been doing some focus studies, focus groups, and hearing from residents, farmers, hunters, businesses on their thoughts in regards to deer population, what possibly could be implemented. They have made some changes to the regulations. slight impact to the city of Grand Rapids, but it does have an impact on the deer population throughout the state, in particular Kent County. So one of the items they ended up implementing for regulation this year was the 2024 deer hunting season. They're going to be extending the archery season for antlerless deer until January 31st. I'm not sure how many hunters I have sitting up here, but the archery season ends on January 1st of each year, and they've extended it for 7 counties: Huron, Kent, Lapeer, Sanilac, Tuscola, St. Clair, and Washtenaw. So they recognize some of these counties where they have an overpopulation of deer, and they're trying to address it through some of the hunting regulations. Kent County being one of those. I just want to make sure you're aware of that. They also created a new antlerless season, which will be January 2nd through the second Sunday of the month for 8 additional counties. So that's Bay, Midland, Newaygo, Macomb, Oakland, Livingston, Calhoun, and Monroe. Highly populated counties that they're recognizing that there's a deer population that's greater than what they would like. They're also expanding the early and late firearm season for antlerless deer to both public and private property. For those of you who may be aware, it was only, prior to that, it used to only be on private property. Now they've expanded it to public property. And beginning in 2025, they have 2 separate hunts. One's called the Liberty Hunt, one's called an Independence Hunt, which is for youth 16 and younger, and then for those who are disability. They are implementing that they can only be antlerless deer as opposed to either an antlered or antlerless deer. So beginning in 2025, the regulation is going to only be for antlerless deer, which, if you know anything about deer hunting, most hunters are looking for a buck. They are foregoing the does, which is the ones creating the more bucks. So it's kind of an evolution, if you will. Sorry, Ms. Behrens. I'm familiar with that philosophy as well. So just wanted to share some of that with you. Things are moving forward. I think we're on the right track. I have talked to a number of residents who have been reaching out, wanting to know what we're doing. In their mind, it doesn't feel like that we're doing much. So I've been assuring them that we are moving in that direction. Yes, it's taking longer than we anticipated, but we've really taken a regional approach to this, and I think we're on the right path. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but expect every couple of months I'll come back and at least give you an update on where we're at so that you're kept up to speed.
Thank you, Mr. Hurt. That is greatly appreciated. I'm not accepting the winter approaching us idea, but I know where I live. So, colleagues, any questions?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Madam Chairwoman. Thanks for the work on this this issue. I know it was probably one of the first things I was contacted about, I think, when I joined this body. And I do agree that I think a broader approach working with the county and the state are going to make it most effective long term. But I'm also wondering too, I know the city's regulations do permit some very limited forms of hunting. So I know speaking on the west side, I know we know kind of some of the problem areas like, Blandford Nature Center, some of the larger property owners there. So I'm wondering, while we're waiting for some of this data to come back from GVSU and waiting on the slow moving governments above us, if there's, some options we could maybe come up with locally too, just to kind of help address it sooner than later. I know hunting season is coming up sooner than later too. So just wanted to propose that as an option, because I think we can work with some of the existing regulations and guardrails we have in place as a city to still move the needle.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In the ordinance, it does allow within the city parks or property that's controlled by the Parks Department to have hunting authorized by the Parks Department director.
Yeah, and
that could be an option.
Okay.
If that's the consensus. And
sure. And I think too, you spoke to some of the other events that the city, I believe, coordinates with, whether it's like, people with disabilities, youth, teaching them, proper and healthy relationships with hunting, or disabled veterans or things like that. So I think it seems like there's some guardrails too that we could maybe even copy and implement for something more local. So I just know I continue to get comments about this, and while it's important to still address it from a larger holistic perspective, I think that there's hopefully some things we can do locally in the meantime too.
Madam Chair, if it is the concurrence of the other commission members on the body that you'd be interested in us exploring our existing statutes and whether hunting on public property is something the rest of the commission would like us to look at for this year, we can do that. looking for some affirmation from the other commissioners.
I think it's,
Makes sense.
All right, we will look into that, work with our Parks Department, and coordinate something coming back to the commission.
that sounds great.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hurt.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And next, we have a presentation and update by the Police Department, but first I want to turn this over to Deputy Behrens. She's got something she'd like to share.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to note before we hand it off to the chief that obviously public safety is a coordinated effort across not only our law enforcement sworn officers, but our city attorney's office, but also the district court, 61st District Court. And I want to take a moment to just recognize the leadership of Tanya Todd, court administrator. She has let us know that she is moving on to a new opportunity with the state, which I think will be great for all of us. But I do want to thank her for her leadership over there at the 61st District Court. She's really been a visionary and a supporter of a lot of great and creative ideas for how to handle prosecution, sentencing, and welcoming people back into the community that have had a brush with the law. And all of those things are really important for us all to achieve our public safety objectives. So just want to thank her for her service.
Thank you. And thank you for that work. That's really important work, and we've seen a lot of changes over the years, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen the next few years as we continue to work on how we work with our community. All right, Chief?
All right. Thank you, commissioners and committee members. Okay. We'll start off with the continuation of the good news surrounding auto thefts. As you see here, that spike to the left is what we saw in summer of 2022, popped again in 23, not to that extent, but we were worried about this summer. And the good news is, year to date, we actually have lower auto thefts than we did even before the so-called Kia and Hyundai auto theft social media craze in 22. And that's a testament, obviously, to great work by law enforcement, also the outside-the-box thinking by Chris Becker over the prosecutor's office, Hyundai itself, and our partners in the nonprofit community, including those in the audience today, and everyone in the city thinking of ways to support the youth in our community and giving them safe and giving them ways really to be supported and to find belonging other than in stealing a car. And it's just made such a huge difference in our community, as you can see by the numbers. Robberies and aggravated assaults, see a small bump, but no trends or statistical significance that we have been able to detect at all. What we have seen, again, more positive news, statistically significant. This is a more important statistic here. As you can see, and these include fatal shootings, and we are seeing a huge drop in the use of firearms against other humans in our city, and we want to make sure that this trend continues. And again, I'll credit the excellent work not only of our patrol, the increased staffing that we finally have, lower 911 call times, quicker responses, more officers on the street, but also, again, what we've seen in the 2.5 years that I've been here is a lot of these, both victims and offender of these crimes, are young people. And so the support that we're seeing from adults all across this city to assist and lift up the young people, I think, is making all the difference in the world as far as creating a safe city for everyone. Last statistic I'll share is we have had the lowest number of homicides year to date in a very long time, certainly far before I got here. 7 is 7 too many. Of those, we have seen 4 already cleared by our detectives. Unfortunately, when you're talking about 7 murders, we're talking about 7 people, and 3 of the 7 unsolved murders are, of course, our 15-year-olds, LaKaija Williams and Millie Penn, And those are two cases that are extremely important, as those are children of the city. And our detectives are still working nonstop to get answers and justice for those families. And as you can see, for murders of years past, I speak on a regular basis to loved ones of these open murders. And we have a fantastic detective team. They're working very diligently, and I look forward to the next update where hopefully I have increase in numbers for clearances and better news. 229 illegally possessed guns, that's actually just through the month of July, so it doesn't even include August. So more than a gun a day taken off the streets. An update on our truck enforcement, where we've made the purchase of 2 truck scales. We had an education period of just over a month in our traffic unit. Now those trained on those scales have started taking enforcement actions. 6 violations have been issued so far this month, and I think the message is getting out to commercial truckers to follow the rules in Grand Rapids, and I think we're going to see progress in the neighborhoods which were suffering from the illegal activity, which was difficult for us to enforce. I think that's it for my updates, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Chief. We appreciate the work on that. So can you remind me of the wards where most of these violations were happening, the truck violations? Was it was on the west side, right?
It was. Yes, it was. That is correct.
Okay. Colleagues? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for
Thank you,
your work
Commissioner.
and everything that you're doing to try to keep our community safe and better our police relations and help our families that are impacted. Grateful that those numbers are low, but one is too many, like you said. So appreciate you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Next up, we have a presentation for Cure Violence.
Or good afternoon, Public Safety Committee. Grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you or provide an update along with our great partners, the Urban League, regarding Cure Violence Grand Rapids. This is the 3rd year of Cure Violence, which if we take a minute and just think about where this started from, we've progressed greatly. Many of you may remember or recall that Cure Violence was a recommendation that came from community. Community members asked for us to have an evidence-based violence reduction program, and then it became a recommendation in several different projects, one of those being the 21st Century Policing Project. And then 3 years ago, with the help of the then City Commission and the endorsement and support of the city manager, along with so many other people in community, we launched this effort. So the question is asked, imagine our city without violence, can we do it? And the answer is yes, we can. So we'll just talk today about a few things. By way of reminder, we'll talk about how the Cure Violence model works. And then I will turn it over to our partners at the Urban League, who will talk about some of the accomplishments that have occurred, as well as the database evidence that supports where we are. Spoiler alert, the model is working. So we're excited about that. Then there'll be a summary, and we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So the Cure Violence team is comprised of a program director who is responsible for really staff management and making sure that all of the project items are taken care of well. There's also a site supervisor, and that site supervisor does some supervision. They do the day-to-day scheduling, and they're also out in the street hitting the pavement with our violence interrupters, who work to provide conflict mediation services and develop a rapport with members of the community. They're the individuals who have the day-to-day knowledge, who are really out there having conversation with community members, saying where is violence happening and how do we work to prevent it. And then we have outreach workers or outreach specialists who work to connect those individuals who come into contact with Cure Violence with resources. And those resources may include housing resources, job resources, or other needs that they may have in order to move forward well. Because we know that the social determinants of health are directly connected to the social determinants of violence. So if we can work to get people what they need, then they're less likely to be involved with violence in our community. So how does the model work? The Cure Violence model works just like a health model, right? So what it does is use trained, culturally appropriate workers to interrupt the transmission of violence and to prevent the future spread of violence to transform community norms. So it really looks at it like a health epidemic. It says, how do we stop this contagion? How do we prevent it from being spread across community? And we do that by treating the core of it. So there's 3 strategies associated with this model. It's detecting and interrupting potentially violent conflicts, identifying and treating the highest risk individuals, and also mobilizing community to change norms. When we talk about detecting and interrupting potentially violent conflicts, we're talking about making sure that these violence interrupters, who we talk about as health workers, work to prevent that violence by identifying and mediating potentially lethal conflicts. So they're out in community saying, where and why is violence happening? And how do we work to mediate this so this conflict does not reignite? It also works to identify and treat the highest risk individuals. And we're talking about the individuals who are most likely to either be impacted by the violence or to be participants in the violence. So this model targets those individuals and says, how can we help them get the services they need or to obtain support so they don't find themselves back in this? And this is about fostering long-term behavioral change that helps change the course of their lives, right? So when we think about this health approach, it's about changing their entire life so they can move forward and don't find themselves back in the same space. Then mobilizing community change is about changing the norm, right? So that's engaging community leaders, local business owners, as well as faith-based organizations to help make this long-term change. So the Cure Violence model interrupts the transmission of violence. It stops violence events before they happen. And what happens with that, it reduces violence. It also identifies and changes the thinking of highest potential transmitter. Again, reducing the number of violent individuals reduces violence. When you change community norms, it creates a social pressure to stop violence, which all results in reducing violence in community. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Brown, who will talk us through a little bit of the strategies, and we'll move forward from there.
Good afternoon. So really right here for this part of the presentation, I just get to introduce integral members of the team, Mr. Rich Griffin, who is our site director. So he'll come up and talk a little bit more in depth about the strategies. Then Dr. Stephen Worst will come and he'll get into the data a little bit, not enough for us data geeks and data nerds, but enough to demonstrate. And I'll come back and I think I get the best slides when we talk about how well it's working. So with that, Rich Griffin.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good afternoon to you folks. Thank you so much. This particular slide just identifies, as Mr. Davis and Mr. Brown both mentioned, to how we detect and interrupt that violence and what those particular strategies are programmatically from the outset. Intervention is a violence interrupter is to help reduce the commission of crimes by providing these mediation services. Technically, what this looks like is a mentor-mentee relationship between our frontline staff and the folks that we engage on a day-to-day basis. What you'll see in these upcoming slides are snapshots of accomplishments for Cure Violence for 2024. And in that particular time frame that Cure Violence has been here in the city of Grand Rapids, we have engaged over 2,000 or had 2,000 interactions that led to the detection of and interruption of violence in this community. We've also had 279 interactions that led to the identification and treatment of the highest risk individuals that we engage on a day-to-day basis. We have had 374 interactions that led to mediations with key individuals involved in other conflicts. And when we identify them as key individuals, this means these are the highest risk individuals that we have, those folks who will not participate in other programs by community-based organizations. They are the roughest of the rough folks that we have in our target demographic, if you will. We have sponsored engagements and community events, upwards of 126 of those events throughout the city of Grand Rapids and with our partners throughout our community target areas. And we have over 1,000 residents have participated annually via monthly events sponsored over this past year in the League's Cure Violence program. We've attended or assisted in 13 court cases with those at-risk youth that have allowed for those folks to either be released from community supervision or from their residential treatment that they were in at the time. Most of those folks that we have been involved with have been with the Kent County Justice Center. And through that, we have had 216 visits were made to the Kent County Juvenile Detention Center, where we provide workshop-style mentorship there. Some of that curriculum covers character development, conflict resolution, and things of that nature. There have been over 5,000 Grand Rapidians assisted with referrals through the Urban League's services that we provide, whether that be housing, education, or employment services. We have touched over 5,000 persons throughout the program of Cure Violence for the duration that we've been here. Just recently, the mental health support that we have, a mental health program that we put on, allowed Cure Violence staff, as well as 11 of the highest risk participants, to participate in EMDR therapy, which was something to elevate and look at the trauma that they have experienced throughout their life and some of the mental health issues which may lead to violence and responses to violence in our community. There have been 40-plus partnerships established, not only in the 3rd Ward target area, but as well as the 1st and the 2nd Ward target areas, which were established in the summer of 2023. And the data is working, and at this time, I will introduce my esteemed colleague, Mr. Worse, who will walk you through some of these data statistics.
Good afternoon. I am excited to present to you a summary of the almost 3 years of data that we have on Cure Violence, and I'm going to present that in as pleasant a way as possible. You can tell what I've been instructed to be very careful of as we spend our time together. But one of the things I want you. Oh, okay. And I've just been instructed to introduce myself a little bit to you. I'm a retired researcher from Grand Valley, and I've had the privilege of working for 3 years, from the beginning of the Cure Violence program to the present, and trying to see just what impact are we having in the city of Grand Rapids. One of the things that I want to emphasize is that all of the data that you're going to hear, very briefly, comes from and is sourced from the Grand Rapids Police Department. And I want to thank the chief and his staff for helping us transition to the new platform that they're using in their metric dashboard. It's been a great move, but it took some learning for me, and his staff was just very helpful to make that happen for us. But I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to move down to this slide. This is a review of the 33 months that Cure Violence has been in existence. It started in November 2021, and it shows us each bar that you see in the graph up to the present, which is July of this year. But I've included 6 months prior to the beginning so that you can have an idea of how we determine what the baseline data was. And if you look closely, you'll see that the important part of this graph, in addition to all of the fluctuations which are typical to public safety research, typical showing the spikes in spring and summer activity, fall and winter declines. But in spite of that, you see that the trend line is what's really helpful here. And the trend line, as you know, is an indicator of how the data is moving. In what direction is the data moving, and it has consistently been moving downward. And when you take the percentage compared to those 6 months prior to the beginning of Cure Violence to the present, there's a 35.303% decrease in aggravated assaults within the target area. And I think you all know what that target area is referring to. It's the initial target area that we were tasked with to put our focus on. The number of, or the percentage of murders in the target area over this 33-month period ends up being 33.33% decrease. Now, there is a way that you can combine those two statistics to form one percentage, and that percentage would be that we've seen a decrease in the target area of violent crime at the rate of, let me get this right, 65, a little more than 65% over that 33-month period. Now, on a little different note is this record of the last 4 quarters of fiscal year 2024. And I want you to hear why this is important. These maps, based on data, of course, from the Grand Rapids Police Department, show the location of every violent crime within our target area. Now, you know from your experience that this gives us the ability to plan where our interventions might be readjusted or modified. It also gives us an ability to see where communities and neighborhoods are making changes. And one of the things I want to point out, we can see, if you were to see a whole series of these maps over the course of the Cure Violence Grand Rapids history, you'll see that there are certain neighborhoods in our target area that have seen a continuous decline in violent crimes. And that gets exciting for our team, for all of us involved in Cure Violence. Now, these last 3 slides are related to the expanded efforts that happened as a result of being tasked about a year ago. It was last summer with couldn't we do something similar in the first ward and the second ward? And this heat map on the left was our baseline. It was a record of all of the violent crime, and I didn't define this earlier, but violent crime, according to the Cure Violence Global Office, is the combination of aggravated assaults and murders. But the total of those for the months of January through June in 2023 look like this. Now, that was before the expansion. And so, of course, the expansion would mean that we're collecting data from these 2 additional target areas. We're interested in what the new target areas will show us in the next 12 to 24 months. What will they show us about the impact of some of the interventions that we're initiating in those 2 target areas, which you can kind of vaguely see? I apologize that they're not as bright and brilliant as they should be, but in the first ward and the second ward, and then you see the target area that was the initial one in the third ward. So just quickly, we see this baseline data. And then in the right heat map, you see what our community looked like in the first 6 months of 2024. And while it's not dramatic, you can see, and this is a happy phenomenon that we even heard from the chief this morning, or this afternoon, that violent crime in our community is making an exciting decrease. One of the things that we hope to accomplish in that expanded task is to be able to come up with some very specific recommendations for those particular target areas. But like we said, when we first started with the third ward target area, it takes time and it takes a group of new data sets to do that. Now, I hope I've been concise and to the point, and if you have any questions later on, please don't hesitate to ask, or even now, or how do you want to do this?
We'll ask at the end if that's all right.
Okay, sure.
Thanks, Doc. And then this is just a little a map that shows the violent crimes throughout the entire different 3 wards throughout the city. Doc went into that pretty good detail. And this one was 2023 and 2024, expanded out of what he just showed us. So basically, again, that's why I said I get to come up for the best part. It's working. Brandon said that on the onset, and we believe that not only has the empirical data showed that, but also the y'all know what I'm trying to say. The narrative part of the situation, the qualitative data. We skipped past the slide accidentally, but and you guys have it in your presentation of some of the comments of the community. It's definitely working. It's, again, as we've said before, it's not short term, but I think in the 12, I'd say 30 to 36 months that we've really been working it for about 30 months. I think we have, without a doubt, shown that the program has been implemented with fidelity and is doing very good success, along with the other things around the community. But it's a long-term investment that helps impact, and again, with the chief's report, as well as this, showing the collective impact of what's happening in our city, so that hopefully that narrative can start getting out that the crime is not increasing in Grand Rapids, but it is actually decreasing. Over the past 12 months, this work has been done, amazing work has been done in connecting the community with Cure Violence team in tangible ways, including but not limited to. Parents are starting to reach out. After we've had incidents, we had a mother come and bring a son and a nephew or something like that, said, hey, we need your help. They're starting to seek us out now after some of the incidents in our city. Various school districts are actively recruiting the CV team. We're very, very active in Ottawa, Alger, and so some of the other schools, Union and other, again, as capacity will give us the ability to, we're active in those schools. There is a quote, I think it's a part of the quote bubbles that are out there from one Ottawa Hills principal, and it would be great if someday you can hear from him. And go ahead, come on up, Mr. Griffin. Local businesses have asked for our CV team to be able to come in there. We're out at the mall, but yeah, let me read that one. Ultimately, this is a principal at Covenant High School. Ultimately, the education Cure Violence provides to our youth has been critical for our environment. That's Mr. Large. Dr. Maben at Ottawa, up here at Ottawa, I attribute the decrease in violence to the time Cure Violence spends with my kids during let out. There's another, I think if we could go even deeper with Dr. Maben on a specific incident if he was here, but very critical in sustaining actually even his own livelihood or life. So basically local businesses are seeking us out. We're having an impact in greater than just our target area. We've demonstrated the target area and then how that correlates with throughout the city. What's next? We need to widen our reach, and the city's asked us to do that for first and second wards. Dr. Worse showed the necessity for that, expand partnerships as he talked about, so that we can have an increased impact to continue to keep that trend line going down, influencing long-term changes. Building relationships with the young folks, it takes time. It takes time, it takes trust. Our credible workers are able to do that, and it's starting to show even greater dividends. We have to continue to engage, mobilize, and be present in the community, be visible in the community, and then we look forward to continue to work into the foreseeable future. So now, Doc, we can have, or Brandon will entertain questions.
So thank you. Right before we do that, it's just one quick point I want to make sure we draw some attention to. So when we talk about the expansion, I want to make sure that everyone understands what we're discussing. When Cure Violence first started in Grand Rapids, we had one target area. That target area was in the 3rd ward. Again, we've gone through the data to kind of talk through that. But the thing is that crime is transient. Right? It doesn't stay in one place. So when Cure Violence expanded to the 1st and 2nd wards, that was as a result of community requests for that. Started with participatory budgeting, where community said, we want to see this work in both the 1st and 2nd wards. And I know there was question about whether it was necessary to be in the 1st and 2nd ward. I wanted to make sure we took a second to look at this heat map, but it also shows where our 1st and 2nd ward target area are. If you notice, there are directly next next to the Third Ward target area. And because crime is not transient, it supports the need for why it's necessary for Cure Violence to continue to work in those target areas as well. With that, again, we thank all of our partners. First of all, the Urban League has been an amazing partner in this work. It's hard to believe it's been 3 years already. Just like it took 3 years of data for us to really answer the question, is it working in the Third Ward? It's going to take time for us to be able to say that across the First and Second Ward. But we know the Urban League isn't doing this alone. The work of our police department and other community partners all works together to make this happen. So thank you for allowing us to provide this update, and we'll entertain questions at this time.
Thank you for that presentation and all the work that went into that. I think I'll let my colleagues go first, and then I'll chime in later. Got a couple of questions. Go ahead, down on this end.
First of all, it's to me very commendable the progress that you've made in 33 months or almost 3 years, because it's involved in helping this get started in terms of funding and so forth. That point is really well taken, as well as the coordination. I'm very impressed with the accomplishments, 126 different community events, because that is crucial, especially in summertime, for young people to have a place to go and relate in a healthy way. The one question, more than one probably, but going forward, when you talk long-term, I'm assuming that has to do with funding. And are we getting support from governmental agencies? What does the balance of that look like?
So we have applied for funding from the federal government to help support, and from the state government to help support our Cure Violence efforts. There was a portion of funds that have been allocated for this fiscal year in the amount of $250,000 from the city. Outside of that, we are seeking additional funding. As far as how much it costs to run the program altogether, it's upwards of $1 million annually to make this program run well. So we are interested in all funding sources in order to make that happen.
Thank you. Really impressed with the size of the organization and the data that you.
Can you pull your microphone over?
Just a quick reminder to pull the microphone closer. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for your presentation today. And I'm not asking for the weeds here, but with 279 interactions that led to identification, 374 interactions leading to mediations, those are both recognizing key individuals that may be obviously specifically of interest for this program. I'm just curious, those are really big numbers, but how many individuals are we identifying as high risk? Because I'm sure 279 interactions, probably some of those are the same individual.
Sure. Thank you for that question. So out of those folks that are engaged on a day-to-day basis, let's just say that a young man or young woman is engaged by Cure Violence outreach specialists and violence interrupters that have had a conflict in school. That conflict, to some of the things that have been said about violence being transient, is not going to just stick with that one particular incident. It may spill over into a different incident. It may spill over from Alger Middle School to the transit center downtown, from the transit center downtown to the mall. Just to give you a real quick anecdotal evidence of this, I want to say it was May, we had an incident that took place at the mall that then spilled out into a park 2 days later, and our staff were present in that park to mediate that conflict between about 7 individuals. But those conflicts may lead to further conversations, not only with that individual, but with folks who are involved in the incident collectively, if that makes sense.
Hey, Rich, when we count 279 interactions, are those 279 separate individuals?
They will be 279 separate individuals, but they could be the same incidents. So there may be 10 people talked to for one instance.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chairwoman. Not a question, just a comment, and I'm grateful for the work that we did to expand it into the First Ward. I know, like you said, crime doesn't necessarily know geographic bounds, and so just looking forward to see how that impacts our First Ward neighborhoods as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yay. Okay. Knowing a little bit about this program, and just a number of things just clicked off in my head. One of them being looking at the map that you showed where the crime what's happening in the different wards and thinking about what's going on with our housing and how some people may be in one ward and because they have had to move into other areas, has that been traveling with them, and is there a way to kind of track some of that and where people may have lived previously? And then I got a whole litany, okay? And then also thinking about like the amount of guns that Chief was talking about earlier in their report and how many have been taken off the street up to this date. Are y'all making the direct, and you probably are, but correlations between any of those guns and people that you have interacted with as if they were the ones that you may have talked with or engaged with, and then the police department was able to interact with them and be able to remove some of those guns off of the street. Another piece, I asked that one already. So the overall, because you asked the big question at the end, which is, always the main question, is how do we make this sustainable, right? So this can't be a helicopter type of approach in our community, because then that's not sustainable, right? And we know that the cost is, you talk about upwards of $1 million. Now, I know there have been some investments previously when this first started, if we're applying for money or grants from the state, like what does it cost? What is it going to cost for you to move into the first ward? Because I know even through participatory budgeting, that was not a huge amount of money. Like that barely could cover a couple of months of payroll, if I'm not mistaken.
Not quite, but okay.
Oh, okay, so off on that one, right? And so what is the big number, and what are we asking for, and what needs to be done? Because if this can't be sustainable over years, how are we going to go into these areas and begin to do work that we can't sustain consistently, right? Like how much are you getting from, how much do you have to put in as the league to do this? How much is the city putting in? What other money are we getting to sustain this? And how do we make it a situation where it can continue to go on, as opposed to we got 2 more years of this and then we're back where we started?
So, thank you, Commissioner. I will start with the last question, and then we'll work our way through. So annually, we bring forth contracts related to cure violence, both at the Urban League level and the global level, which is our partner that provides training and technical assistance. When Cure Violence first started, the city committed to $75,000 a year for 3 years, and there was supplemental funds provided from outside organizations that helped to get there. However, the Urban League has always fundraised for Cure Violence significantly, and through that fundraising has supported over half of the amount that's necessary to fund the program completely. We're now at a new space. The 3-year period has expired. The city has committed to $250,000 for this year, and we're seeking additional funds to make that happen. But if we talk about the gap at this point, we're talking about $750,000, because like the city committed for 3 years, outside partners also committed to that initial 3 years. So we're at a critical space where we are figuring out what this next space looks like. Obviously, Mr. Brown and I are in intense conversations around that. We're committed to making it happen, and we're really hopeful that our federal and state partners will continue to kick in to make that happen. But when we're talking about a number, we're talking about $1 million, right? Like we need to get to the $1 million to make that sustainable, however, from whatever sources we're getting that from.
Yeah, just to add, I cannot stress enough how important it is for us to get this settled. Sustainability for a program like this is paramount to a success. The relationships that have been built, the roads that have been tread in order for us to get this part, it would be tragic for us to have to retreat in some of those areas right now. I think it could be, I don't want to paint gloom and doom, but it could be tragic. It could be kind of devastating to the success of the overall program, overall where we're going with crime in the city if we don't figure out the sustainability. Without getting too far in the weeds, Brandon and I are talking. He's right on. It's actually slightly over $1 million, like $1,070,000 to be exact. The city has, and just one point of that 250, half of that is committed to Cure Violence Global.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have two contracts we got to pay.
Yep, so then that lessens the million, the 1.7, the $1,070,000, that's our cost. That doesn't include Care Violence Global cost. You guys can do the math from there as far as, percentages and all that. We do appreciate the city stepping in the expansion, and we were able to get more. We were actually, last year, you guys did more than the 125, really kind of supported that expansion in a greater detail. But the numbers are significantly that we have to fundraise for. You guys are familiar with philanthropy. If I'm fundraising for one thing, they're not going to fund something else that's going down. Some of the other upstream efforts that we could work on, like education, some of the education prevention things, I can't get funding for this. The success of this program has been worth it. The ROI, I believe, to this point has been worth it. I think we just, as a collective, have to be able to say, this is important to the city and within the city budget. I appreciate the efforts of doing grants. Applying for grants, being one that has federal grants, I understand the time framing on those. Those things can go on for a long time. Without those certainty, to be able to run the program with fidelity and keep it going, we do need sustainability and certainty around the financial piece as we go forward.
So to the second question related to guns being taken off the
Before
street.
you go,
Oh,
can I have a question?
Yeah, I wasn't done, but go ahead.
Just wanted to know, Mr. Brown, how does other cities that have this kind of programs fund their efforts?
go ahead.
By and large, the city funds the efforts generally around 100%.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Davis, I just had a question. Karen had given us a legislative report, when was that, back in July, I believe? And there was a list of the Community Violence Prevention Community Grant Program with the additional $500,000 appropriated to continue the support of the Office of Community Violence Intervention. Over $18.5 million was appropriated in '24 in ongoing funding. Cure Violence is expected to be eligible to apply and receive funding from this program. So is that something that you guys are doing in unison, or how is that working in applying towards helping to fund the program?
Yeah, we connect on all of the grants that we hear about, either by letters of support if our office is applying for it or if their office is applying for it, but we meet regularly to discuss these opportunities to connect.
So you are applying together, or are they applying, or is the city applying
So
separately?
there's a federal and a state, and forgive me for not knowing the names of the appropriations, but there are two that we've applied for that the city applied for through the legislative office, and the Urban League has supported us in those efforts and also had outside conversations with those legislators and things of that nature as well.
So,
But Commissioner, at this point, I don't know the names of them. I have to go and look through, and I can tell you.
okay,
which
because
one.
I was like, that didn't answer my question. But I'm trying to see if this is and it was from July 16th, and it was in her report back from the state.
Yep. I can follow up and let
initiatives.
you know which ones we've applied for.
Yeah, because it'd be important to know if we're talking about moving into two different wards and barely having enough funding to cover what's happening right now, if this funding is available, if we haven't went after it, why haven't we? And then secondly, how much of that funding then is going to go directly to that programming to help for those expansion efforts? Because throwing pennies at a problem is not going to help solve anything.
Sure.
Just throwing that out there. And then also to the fact of fundraising. This organization is responsible to do the majority of the fundraising for this programming. Philanthropy in our community has changed drastically, right? And so you can go after one, like you said, but you may not be able to go after the others. And then so how do we take some of that responsibility if the work that we're doing is impacting the crime in this city as a whole in conjunction with our police department? Then we have an onus to kind of help support that so that it can be sustainable again. Otherwise, yeah. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. So, again, we'll follow up on the specific names and which grants we've applied for. I do recall you mentioning the Office of Violence Prevention at the state level. When they did release their RFP, we did apply for that. I believe the Urban League also applied for that. So we applied for those individually, although we stated the support for each other in it, and neither of our offices were granted that for the first go-round.
All went to the east side. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's the honest answer, is that the majority, almost all of that support went to Detroit.
So on that note, honestly, I mean, we do have, we did that, and obviously we got a lot of support from the city, but how we can advocate to make sure that we get some of those resources on the east side as a body will be good.
So to your other two questions, Commissioner, as it relates to guns off the street and being able to determine whether or not that's the result of interventions or individuals that there have been interventions with, there's currently not a tracking mechanism where we can say, yes, this was an individual where there was an interaction with. I would, anecdotally, there's definitely some correlation in those numbers, but there's no way for us to track who they came from and whether or not they were a part of or interacted with from the Cure Violence program.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Colleagues, anything? Yes, sir.
I think you had a question, Ms.
Did you have a question?
I was just going to ask, how much of your budget, what do you spend most of your money on in your budget? Is it employees or is it
Personnel.
personnel?
70% of it is personnel. The rest of it is to make sure that we're having necessary funds to be engaged in the community in the proper way, but also to meet needs. There is the part of meeting the physical needs of the people that we work with in order to be able to open relationships. I won't go into detail. We've done that before. We've heard the story about Zach. We've heard the story, maybe not at this body, Zach, a 9-year-old, was it that we were working with? They're working with him. He had got in trouble at school, but he goes home every day he's got to step over 12, 16 people just to get to a spot to lay down. So these are some of the people that we're working with. Folks that outside of a school meal, they're not getting meals. So in order sometimes we got to meet the physical need in order to be able to go in and help them out with some of the more deeper traumatic needs and those type of things. So
How many staff do you have?
right now, if at full staff, we're at 12. That's current right now, right, with a couple vacancies?
So we would have currently, total would be
14.
Okay.
We started off with 8, we added 6 in the expansion, which were to be able to fill out in the wards. And so, yeah, we're at total at 14 right now.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? Thank you, gentlemen, very much for that presentation. We look forward to hearing more updates in the future. All right, and lastly, we have our update on public health and safety ordinances.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to awkwardly present from the dais, and I'm pulling up the slideshow real quick, so bear with me. I know that we're close on time here, so I do want to just start off real quickly, but might click through quickly through our slides today. But as we talked about last year when this committee was in the thick of conversations around how to address some of the concerns particularly raised downtown with some health and safety issues, we committed to bringing back a report on how we were pursuing some of the objectives of the city. So if you recall, we were focused in particular on issues surrounding the unhoused in our community and health and safety, both for those individuals and for the rest of the community, and really have a three-pronged approach to that, if you will. So there's investment in facilities, there's investment in services, and there is investment in enforcement. So today we're here to talk a little bit about all three of those things. So without further ado, I'm going to appreciate our partners who are here to also present. We have Vera Beach from Community Rebuilders, who's going to be up first to tell us a little bit about the results from the investment that the commission approved, and we were joined by some other community partners with geographically targeted outreach. And then I'll go over some stats of our own enforcement and education, and then we will have Courtney Myers-Keaton from the COC to also talk about an initiative underway. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Vera Beach to join us at the podium.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking time today. I am really excited to share with you.
Can you pull your microphone down? I'm sorry.
You bet.
Thank you.
To share with you some of the impactful work that we've done. Over the last year, we focused on key areas on Monroe Center and the Veterans Park area. And we defined those areas based on thoughtful discussion with community stakeholders, outreach worker data, and consult with city staff. This project has really helped to vitalize these core areas. Public safety has been enhanced and local business vitality is improving. Our proactive housing-focused approach has really transitioned people from the streets to homes where they're able to build their lives and their futures. Since last year, we've engaged 31 households in the GTHO project, successfully moving 61% or 19 households into permanent housing. An additional eight households representing 25% are currently in bridge housing and actively working towards their permanent housing plan. So our approach is not only accelerating the transition from the streets to stability, but it's also dramatically cutting costs associated with homelessness. It makes a compelling case for the financial efficacy of this work. With as little as one housing-focused outreach effort, we are seeing persons pack up their belongings, move off the streets, and start building a long-term plan for their housing and their future. As we review the demographics of the geographically targeted outreach project, it's clear that our approach is finely tuned to meet the many complex needs of the diverse population. This past year, the project served 39 individuals. 49% of those were chronically homeless. Therefore, they were grappling with long-term homelessness compounded by a severe disability. A significant 74% of our participants contend with physical and mental health conditions. This really requires a multifaceted community approach. The majority of persons served, representing 50%, were between the ages of 25 and 44, people who are in their prime working years. The financial precarity among participants is evident, with 95% having no income when they entered the project and began seeking housing with us. This really underscores the critical need for our interventions. Additionally, another 40% were aged 45 and older, including 15% who are seniors, 65 plus, pointing to a substantial segment of the population that is at higher risk due to potential limited earnings as well as increased health conditions. Our gender analysis shows a majority of female participants at 51%, highlighting a specific need to address specific vulnerabilities and supports for females. 30.7% of our clients are Black or African American. This disproportionate amount, when considering the representation in the general population of Kent County, indicates systemic disparities that the program is addressing. Our targeted areas, Monroe Center and Veterans Park, are not just social hubs, but they are crucial economic areas. Our activities in these areas have really stabilized lives, boosted the local businesses, and contributed to safer, more vibrant neighborhoods. We are incredibly thankful for our partners in the business community who have notified us and helped us locate persons that are in the area and needing assistance, and really been partners in developing plans and assisting with needs. Together, we are really contributing to the broader safety and economic vitality of Grand Rapids, and we're proud of that. We have encountered critical challenges that remind us of the complex nature of this issue as well. This past year, 4 individuals disengaged from our service. These individuals were influenced by severe mental health issues or involvement in criminal activities. These cases underscore the urgent need for system enhancements and additional tailored support services. We are continuing to seek out and investigate promising and emerging solutions to address these gaps. We have ideas, and we look to our community partners, such as Catherine's Health Center, who has demonstrated some really incredible interventions that we think can be expanded on. Highlighting these practices that are helpful and maybe not institutionalized in our community is one of the goals that we have as we move forward. By focusing on innovative solutions and strengthening our partnerships, we want to make sure that we can re-engage those who have drifted away and help them, as well as prevent future cases of persons leaving the project. So it's really the heart of the work is to tell the story of the people. And John's journey from the streets to stable home is both inspiring and a profound testament to resiliency and hope. John faced many challenges when he was living on the street. He had a partner. They've been together for over 24 years. She has severe health conditions that are critical and will ultimately end her life. Every day, he would carry their belongings around this community and make sure that when he did go to his work, which he did work several hours a week on an irregular basis, he would make sure that she stayed in an area on Monroe Center where people would see her if something happened. He was very concerned that she might pass out, that she might have a medical emergency, and no one would be there to help her. They spent 3 years on the streets of our city. The turning point came when a Community Rebuilder staff member approached him with a life-changing offer. How would you like us to help you get into a home? He says he was overwhelmed with disbelief. He could hardly believe what she was saying and didn't think it was true. Within the next day, he found himself in our temporary housing accommodations where he started to transform their life. Together, they just signed a new lease for their second year in housing. So they're entering their second year, being one of the first couples that joined the program. They are now getting sufficient medical care. They can finally rest and they feel like they're at peace. But he has aspirations that go far beyond just maintaining his housing. John wants to really give back. He wants to work at Community Rebuilders and help others realize the dream of housing. And he really feels compelled to help people understand that if you feel it's impossible, there is hope, and it isn't impossible to get into housing again and restore your lives. As we continue to forge ahead, your ongoing support and partnership are crucial. Our efforts not only address homelessness, but also a stronger and safer community. I want to thank you for all of your commitments and the further collaboration as we move forward with this project over the upcoming year, so that we can all ensure that no one in Grand Rapids has to call the streets their home. Thank you very much. And Kate, I don't know if we have time for questions, but.
Let's get through all the slides.
Okay.
Let's get through all the slides and then we'll go to questions. Thank you. So then just looking at the city's data pieces before we turn it over to the 100 and 100 initiative, I'll quickly go through these. We have shared this data in the past. So what is on your slide here are the data from fiscal year 2024, which just for everybody that doesn't think in fiscal years was really July through September of 2023 is the quarter one. Quarter two is October to December of 23. Quarter three is January to March of 24. April to June 24 is quarter four. So here you see that we're kind of seeing upticks and downticks. It's a little bit too short a duration to really see a lot of trends, but just to understand that we continue to see some calls into our 311 center with a whole host of issues asking for support or calling to our attention, folks who may need support in the community. You'll see an uptick towards the end of fiscal year 24 in that because upon implementation of our excess personal property ordinance, we changed the way we track some of the calls into 311 and are now capturing that calls for assistance on excess personal property more consistently into, and so you see that in the top chart in the blue bars could be part of the reason for the uptick in those calls. You're also seeing at the bottom of the slide here some of our data around code compliance, responding to encampments. So I'm just going to emphasize encampments are different than excess personal property and how the city responds to that. Encampment response was something that we had worked through as an organization and as a community in 2020, and we've continued to use those protocols moving forward. You'll see that we have, again, kind of steady state or even an uptick in our responses to encampments, which means we still have too many people living unhoused, living outside, living in encampments. But part of our data there tells us that we are better coordinating across our own departments. So when we see encampments on public property, we have pushed out the information for our staff on where to go to get folks connected into services and into housing resources, and then come along and clean up that encampment. So we are doing that sooner. We may be cleaning up some areas more frequently. So again, maybe one of the drivers of the data you're seeing there. We also have reported periodically on our homeless outreach team data and their interactions. So the big long bars that go all the way over to the right, that's kind of their overall number of outreach contacts. And then we have information about diversions and other treatments and connections they're able to make with the community. Again, same fiscal year 2024 that we're looking for there. Blue is the first quarter, orange the second, gray the third, and goldenrod is the fourth quarter. Again, you'll see a downward trend. We don't believe that is a meaningful indication that we have fewer people living outdoors still, or that are outdoors and connecting with our hot folks as much as kind of a work style and workflow issue. So continuing to see about the same level of demand for hot interactions. This is just a partial illustration. This body has been very interested in how we are implementing the excess personal property ordinance that was adopted by the City Commission last year, with improvements to our process, to our notice, posting notices, and impounding procedures. So this is just a partial graphic to let you all know that we have worked internally through all of the departments that are necessary to impose this ordinance or operationalize this ordinance. So we rely on our O&M staff across the portfolio of ownership. So park staff is familiar with this, mobile GR staff is familiar with this, obviously public services staff are familiar with this. So in order to ensure that across departments we're being consistent, and as new folks are hired into positions, we have an easy way to train people. We've created, in partnership with all of those departments and the supervisors and our legal department, this kind of flow chart. We've also used this to help with outreach into our community. So with the help of Tammy Vincent and others, we have shared this full detail and talked through kind of the decision tree here with people at the COC, with Housing Kent subcommittees, and with individuals who have asked that represent various providers. So again, trying to push out to the community what enforcement of this excess personal property ordinance should look like, and letting folks know we are open to feedback if it doesn't look like this, and we follow up to the extent that we can, either to improve our practices or to share information about why enforcement looked a certain way in a certain situation when we can. And appreciate all of the feedback we have gotten from the community to help us in this regard. Just a little bit more data on implementation. So we also have signage that we are installing in some locations. So mobile GR ramps, some of our parks, et cetera, we're putting up signage about the excess personal property ordinances and what the limitations are. That helps us more quickly be able to respond to any abandoned property or property that is accumulating above what the ordinance requires. It acts like that notice that we're required in advance of impoundment. So that's the kind of visualization there. We had also, if you recall, at the time this excess personal property ordinance was adopted, the commission also created some additional definitions and refinement and improvement in our ordinance related to loitering, particularly with respect to not only doorways, but I can't remember the term of art that was created at the time, but accosting behavior. So accosting behavior is where you are having an unwelcome contact with someone that creates a feeling of pressure, particularly around places where a person can't reasonably get away from that accosting behavior. So at the time, we had talked about keeping data on prosecution, so that's what you see here. I do want to flag that that is around the misdemeanor ordinances of accosting and loitering. We have not charged anybody under the excess personal property ordinance. As we committed at the time, really our goal there and our belief was we were going to get to a lot of voluntary compliance. So once the rules were clear and we were able to communicate about those rules and we were able to connect people with other resources like the personal property storage option at Mel's, that we were going to get to voluntary compliance, and really do see a lot of that happening. I'll just click through these quickly so that we can get to the other updates, but just you'll have in your packet the details across our departments of enforcement and where they're focusing their cleanup, and do want to note that we are keeping that information and can report on it periodically. So with that, I do want to note that another topic, and Ms. Beach referred to this as well, is to continue to focus on systems change and systems improvement in our homelessness response. So the timeline between someone being known to the system and when they can get into a unit is still longer than we would like. And so here today to talk about 100 and 100 initiative and how we hope that will get us some information that will help us with that continued systems change is Courtney Myers-Keaton, who is with our Coalition to End Homelessness.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you. So a little bit about 100 and 100 and the Coalition to End Homelessness, if you're not familiar, is that the Coalition exists as our local homelessness response system. We are the designated continuum of care for HUD for Kent County, which means that we coordinate all of our different service providers, advocates, agencies that might connect with somebody who's experiencing homelessness or is at risk for experiencing homelessness, to really try to ensure that they move through the system and exit to permanent housing destinations and don't come back. So our goal is to make homelessness rare, brief, and one time only, and that is something that we have adopted as a community. What we know, though, is that we do not have enough system resources. That is just a sad reality that all communities are facing when they're trying to end homelessness, particularly for some of our most vulnerable population as well, which is chronic homelessness. So Ms. Beach spoke a little bit about chronicity and those who are living on the street in particular, and the needs that they're experiencing and their vulnerabilities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we are doing as a coalition to really try to end chronic homelessness specifically. So you can see we have a lot of partners engaged and at the table. We have a regular planning group that is meeting to discuss this. But really where this came out of was about a year ago, we had participated in a Built for Zero learning session. So you may have, if you've seen me here before, you may have heard me speak a little bit about Built for Zero. That is a national movement to end homelessness for a particular subpopulation, depending on what your community has chosen. Kent County joined this movement, I want to say about 3 years ago now. And the subpopulation we chose to focus on was chronic homelessness. And that is because in our community, we have already ended veterans homelessness through the leadership of community rebuilders, actually. So we started focusing on chronic homelessness, and really the first step is identifying who's experiencing chronic homelessness in your community. So that means not just combing through our homeless management information system, because we know that that data does, while it's good quality data, there's probably going to be some people that are missing. And so we really had to get our community partners together. We developed a reporting tool to make sure that we were capturing all of the information that we could. And we hold case conferencing meetings with our partners on a regular basis. In those case conferencing meetings, we're looking through that list. We're identifying that we can confirm chronicity to the best of our ability, so that we have reasonable assumption based off of what they have told us and the length of time that they're experiencing homelessness. And then we start discussing, what do we need to do to try to get them into housing? What are the things that they need? How do we make sure that they have the documents ready? Because even though at the point of referral, they don't need to have all of those documents, when they go to that housing provider, they cannot move in until those documents are available. And so that oftentimes tends to be what holds up people from getting housed quickly once they're experiencing chronic homelessness and they get into referral. They are waiting from the point of referral to move in because they don't have those documents. So we've started working with a lot of our outreach providers, particularly, and our shelter advocates to work with the individuals experiencing chronic homelessness that they know and can get some of those things ready as soon as possible so that we can facilitate a quicker move-in process. So that's helped a lot. We have a system in place for that. But then we are also facing this reality that we didn't want our by name list to become another waiting list in our community. So we needed additional resources. We needed to be able to come up with a plan to really connect people to other housing resources that exist outside of our system resources. So at the Built for Zero learning session, we said, you know what, I think that our community does have the resources. We just need to coordinate better, collaborate, really realign some of our goals and figure out how we can use them in our system strategically. And then we settled on trying out our 100 and 100 initiative. And I'll be honest, it was really daunting at first. We came back, everybody said, yeah, let's do it. And at the same time, we weren't seeing any other resources become available. So we put it on pause a little bit while we were still having conversations, and then ended up in Houston for a site visit to talk to them about how they run their continuum of care, what is the role of their housing commission. And when we came back, we realized that we have a lot of the foundation and building blocks in place to be able to do similar work to what they did. And obviously we were able to apply it and tailor it for our unique community's needs. And then we developed this plan to really start using some of our housing choice vouchers at the Housing Commission and pairing them with people who are experiencing chronic homelessness. The reason why we didn't do that before, though, is because we didn't have the case management to accompany it. Housing choice vouchers do not come with case management. And we know that in order to really become stable when you are chronically homeless, you need to have access to supportive services and high-quality case management. So then the next question became, okay, how do we now build out a case management model for those who have housing choice vouchers instead of permanent supportive housing vouchers? So this led to this group coming together on a weekly basis to really develop this public-private partnership and just take the helm and really start driving this forward. We said that, yes, there's a lot that we need to plan out, but there's a lot that we know that we already have in place and that we wanted to just start now. And that means that our goal is we're starting September to start housing people. And while we may have a few processes and policies that we need to flush out, we already have funding in place for 4 case managers for the 100 and 100. We also know that there are our traditional system resources that have turnover, so we'll have those that are moving into those housing units, and we'll already have connection to case management there. But we're going to test out some new strategies while we're doing this as well. So our goal and our anticipated outcomes is really, obviously, house 100 chronically homeless in 100 days, but we're not stopping there. Our goal isn't to just house 100 in 100, it's to learn from how we house these 100 in 100 days, and then really be able to apply that to our system moving forward. We conducted a project map exercise with all of our partners to identify where some of the gaps were and where some of the critical areas that we would need to focus and develop better processes and policies so that we could be successful with this. And we're going to test the following strategies. We're going to utilize HCVs with a homeless preference. We're going to have systemic landlord engagement through a landlord liaison, flexible funding so that landlords will actually say that they are putting their units online for people experiencing homelessness, knowing that they have case management for those tenants, and that they have up to $5,000 of damages that could be paid for through a flexible funding pool. So it really is providing them incentives and reassurance that we are working with them and that we want good partners in this. So we've had landlords who have agreed to put their units online for this project already, and we are moving forward. So the other outcomes we are looking at is we're going to decrease the amount of time spent on the by name list, increase availability of resources for those experiencing chronic homelessness, and really decrease recidivism and increase exodus to positive destinations for these individuals. So we will have case management for a minimum of 2 years for these individuals. We will continue to track them, stay with them, make sure that they are getting access to the supportive services that they need. We are identifying their house of choice. So if we have units that are available and they choose not to go into those units, we will work directly with them to make sure that we find something that suits their needs. And we will also work with them if that ends up not being their preferred choice or just isn't working out for them, to find a different unit as well. Our planning team consists of the following members. So you can see we have representation from the Chamber of Commerce, Flywheel Momentum, the Grand Rapids Housing Commission, Degage Ministries, Mel Trotter, Pine Rest, Catherine's Care Center, Dwelling Place, and then the COC staff. And this is not an exhaustive list of all partners who are participating. This is just our core planning team that is meeting once a week, oftentimes more than once a week, to make sure that we're getting our policies, our processes, and our workflow worked out. This is really showing our accountability chart, so you can just kind of see some of the behind the scenes work that we are doing. One of the big things that we're really trying to figure out right now, honestly, is just really basic logistics of furniture, donations, how are we managing the donations, how do we prioritize the flexible funding pool, who is going to move people into these units. And luckily we have great partners with United Way, with Mel Trotter, that we have found a storage location, and we will be advertising what our specific donation needs are. But this just gives you that sense of this is the work that we are doing right now, boots on the ground, and we are starting to house people as early as next week, actually. So that gives you a very high-level overview of 100 and 100. And as it progresses, we can provide more updates along with the data that comes out of this project.
All right, thank you. So acknowledging it was a packed agenda, you got about 3 minutes left. We can take questions by email if that is the will of the chair.
Sure, I got a bunch. Thank you so much for that presentation. Thank you, everybody, for your time. If there's anything else, we've got 3 minutes. You can get it out real quick.
Sorry, I did receive a text from Mr. Kettle that there was, due to an administrative error, he was not able to be here, so he did request that we update his absence to excused. So.
Absolutely, how kind of him. All right, well, if there's nothing else, if there's any other questions or thoughts you may have, we can just email that to you, Ms. Mearns.
Yes.
All right, we will conclude at 1:57.